The Washington Commanders have hired Eric Bieniemy to be their new offensive coordinator and assistant head coach. It is a 2-year deal that has a pay raise and a title promotion from his time as the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. I am absolutely ecstatic for this hire.
I'm so excited!
As a huge Washington fan, this almost feels like one little good thing that we've had in so long. And this is obviously going to be a very big offseason for the Commanders. Dan Snyder reportedly selling the team. That's probably going to be a thing sometime, maybe in like mid-March in about a month. Not only that, but you're looking at probably a lame duck head coach in Ron Rivera. There's a lot of things that need to be figured out in Washington. You don't know who your future quarterback is going to be. Maybe it's Sam Howell, maybe it's not. There are a lot of things to figure out. Usually, a lot of good things don't happen in Washington. This is one of those rare times where something good has happened. And fans, I'm obviously very into the Washington fans community. And I know a lot of people that are fans because I live in the area and, on Twitter, and people are pumped for this hire, and I'm right there with them. Eric Bieniemy has been a name in for head coaching vacancies for a long time. Obviously, none of that have ever actually come to fruition, but now here he is kind of taking a pretty big career leap coming to Washington, and I just absolutely cannot wait to see how different the Washington offense looks next year and what kind of fire and spark Eric Bieniemy can come with, because that Washington offense has some serious playmakers. Terry McLaurin is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. I'm excited for the future of Jahan Dotson. I'm excited for Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson running the football. Obviously Sam Howell is a big question mark, but there are some very good things on that Washington offense. I think the offensive line probably does need to get figured out before anything else, or else it is going to be a mess, but there are a lot of positives, and I'm super excited to see what Eric Bieniemy can actually do. Now, obviously, Eric Bieniemy has not been able to get a head coaching job, and that maybe sparks a little bit of worry or some questions, and I think there are a lot of genuine questions that come with it. I'm still a little confused as to how he hasn't. I know people bring up race into it, and I think that is a genuine point, but there also has been a lot of other coaches that have gotten head coaching jobs, even if they have been, not very fair situations. Just thinking of the Texans as one, hiring Lovie Smith wasn't a very fair situation, but you look at the, Dolphins hiring Brian Flores, and there's been a lot of, I think, reasonable hires, so there has to be a lot else there. I know his past gets brought up a lot. Bieniemy did have some legal trouble, 20, 30 years ago almost, and I think that is fair to bring up, but at the same time, it's been such a long time that I don't think, that solely is what has prohibited him from getting a head coaching job. We're also talking about the same league where a quarterback that was allegedly, dealing with a lot of sexual assault charges got a fully guaranteed contract. So pulling out the he had legal trouble card, I know he assaulted a woman and, Bieniemy does have a past, but that was also a very long time ago. I'm sure, I'd be willing to bet that he's a different person. He hasn't had any other, issues in years, and I think it's just kind of unfair to kind of nail him down on that one thing when you're in a league where, Deshaun Watson got all that money and Kareem Hunt's probably going to get a big deal this offseason. So having that standard with Eric Bieniemy doesn't really make a lot of sense. There is the thought of, he didn't call plays in Kansas City. I think that might be the dumbest of it all. That might be by far the dumbest part that everybody brings up. There are so many coaches that have gotten head coaching jobs without ever calling plays. It does not make any sense to use that as a serious reason why Eric Bieniemy has not gotten a head coaching job. Literally just look at the guy before him, Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy did not call plays for the Chiefs. It was Andy Reid. He still got a job, and he absolutely failed. Don't get me wrong, completely failed. Bears fans want to mug him every single time he ever steps foot in Chicago. I'm sure of it.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
But he still got the head coaching job. Look at Joe Judge. He was a special teams coordinator and got the Giants head coaching job. There are so many examples of a head coach that didn't call plays, specifically guys that were under Sean McVay, who is still doing all the play calling. And, it doesn't make sense to bring that up as a huge sole point. And from what I've seen in terms of media narratives, that's been a really big one. is, oh, well, he hasn't called plays. And a lot of guys that have gotten hired for head coaching jobs haven't called plays. Just that one specifically makes no sense to me. Whatever it is, Bieniemy knows that if he wants to become a head coach, he needs to move on. He needs to do his own thing. He needs to prove that he's not stuck in the Andy Reid shadow, and maybe it is because Matt Nagy failed so bad. I don't know. Bieniemy knows that he had to move on. That's what he decided to do, and he's going to go to Washington. And it is a promotion. He's obviously now going to be the guy calling plays, but on top of that, it is now his offense. It is literally his offense. Ron Rivera is a defensive-minded head coach, so he's more involved on the defensive side. He'll probably pass everything off onto Eric Bieniemy to kind of run that offense how he sees fit. He's also the associate head coach, and personally, more than anything, I think that Eric Bieniemy is not a complete idiot, and I think he realizes that Ron Rivera is a lame duck head coach, and that if Ron Rivera does get fired, there's a very good chance that Eric Bieniemy is the interim head coach, and maybe he stays in that role, and even if he doesn't, at the bare minimum, he shows what he can do as a head coach, and then he can go elsewhere if he wishes. This ends up being a pretty big change for both the Chiefs and the Commanders. I think it's pretty obvious that Matt Nagy probably just goes back to being the Chiefs offensive coordinator. He's on the staff right now. Obviously, he left years ago to go to the Bears. It didn't work out. I think it makes plenty of sense. He just slides back into the OC role. He had success there before with, he already knows Patrick Mahomes. He already knows that offense. I don't think that's going to be a very big deal. That seems like an easy fix. The Commanders fired Scott Turner after the season. I still don't think the firing was very necessary. I don't think Scott Turner was the problem at all. I think at the end of the day, the Commanders just had a lot of issues, and Scott Turner was kind of just the scapegoat for everything. It makes the staff look better because I think a lot of fans want Ron Rivera fired, and by firing Scott Turner, it's at least like, hey, maybe that was the issue. We're going to try to fix things up in Washington. But the reality is that there are a lot of issues, and I think, honestly, nothing in Washington gets fixed until ownership changes, and the good news is that's coming soon. Ron Rivera is absolutely on the hot seat. I think if I had to give it a prediction, I'd say like 50-50 chance he actually makes it through this next season. Not only are you talking about a head coach that historically hasn't had a lot of success, and that goes for in Carolina too. I think he's had 3 of 12 winning seasons. He hasn't been very good in terms of winning. I think he's a great culture guy, and I think that is what Washington needed, is a guy to kind of help change the culture. But at the end of the day, if you're not winning, no one cares. I think not only is he already on the hot seat, I think if you bring in new ownership that also did not hire him, I think very quickly Ron Rivera is almost on his way out of the door. Once that does happen, I expect Eric Bieniemy to essentially be named the interim, and we'll see where it goes from there. There definitely is a lot of excitement among the Commanders offense now. I know Jahan Dotson tweeted out, like a little heart emoji after the announcement that Eric Bieniemy was coming to Washington. I think there are a lot of good reasons. I'm sure Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel are absolutely pumped right now because of what Eric Bieniemy could do for that offense. I think there are a lot of reasons to be excited, and I think potentially nobody makes out better in this situation than Sam Howell. Now, Sam Howell is a prospect that I actually really did like coming out of college. I graduated from Virginia Tech, and I've been watching ACC football my entire life, and Sam Howell's a guy that I got to watch closely for, 3 years. So he was very fun to watch. And I think, at one point he was projected to be the first overall pick. Obviously, that fell apart. He had a really, really rough last season in college, and he still declared for the draft. He ended up going really late to Washington. I love this selection. I think he's a guy with a lot of talent. Obviously, he does have a lot of issues. There's a reason he did slip so much, but I think Eric Bieniemy and his offense that is built around Sam Howell could do pretty well. The elephant in the room is that Eric Bieniemy is going from Patrick Mahomes to Sam Howell. That's a big difference. I mean, going from Patrick Mahomes to anybody in the league for that matter is very different. There's not a single person that is as talented or as poised as Patrick Mahomes in the entire NFL, in my opinion. He is by far the best quarterback in the NFL, and by going anywhere else, that's obviously going to take a step down, especially when you're talking about a day 3 late round pick in Sam Howell, who is now projected to be the starter. The good news is that Eric Bieniemy knows that Sam Howell is the projected starter. That was talked about reportedly before Washington talked to these potential OCs. They said, hey, Sam Howell is our guy, and Eric Bieniemy still had an interest and clearly must like something about Sam Howell, unless there's some other talk of Washington going after a veteran, but I highly doubt that's the case. Outside of, a cheap veteran, I don't think the Commanders go after a Derek Carr or anything. There are a lot of reasons to be excited. There's a lot of questions if Sam Howell can be the guy or not, but at the end of the day, more than anything, the Washington Commanders now have something to be excited for next season. Not only are we going to have new ownership, but all of a sudden we have a flashy offensive coordinator who has 2 rings, had a ton of success with the Chiefs, and actually decided to move on from Kansas City to come to Washington to be the offensive coordinator. Eric Bieniemy is the OC for the Commanders. I can't believe it. I don't know when my head is going to process it, but I do know one thing, and that is that I am so excited for this upcoming season now.